Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm one of the partners at Antler here in the UK, and this is the Further Faster podcast, where we are interviewing the best investors, founders, and operators across the globe, getting their insights into what it takes to build outlier businesses. Please like and subscribe if you want to listen to more of our episodes. So today, I'm super excited to be joined by one of our most recent founders in the UK, Guiam Wainwright, who has a very fascinating and wiggly background across counter-terrorism, HR tech, telcos, logistics, AI and robotics, and is now building Occam, which I'm actually going to let you share more on what Occam is, but it's wonderful to have you here today. Can you tell us a bit about Occam?
Sure.
And how you got to here?
Cool. I thought wiggly is going to go on my CV if this doesn't work. I think it's great. Sounds a bit better than flighty, which was the other thing that popped into my head. Occam is on the edge autonomy for robotics. So cheap AI that can basically fly, drive, move, anything, and take control of it to do a mission. So that could be a plane, it could be a missile, it could be your Roomba at home, it could be anything. It's currently used in Ukraine for their drone program. But the fundamental kind of laws of physics maps the same across any platform.
What was the aha moment for Occam?
We are a defense company. I think we've all followed the news and we know what's going on in Eastern Europe. The aha moment for me built over a couple of years. So I think at the beginning of the invasion or special military operation, I felt angry is probably a good word, but not the kind of real sense of anger that came later. But I felt that we, as Europe, even though Ukraine wasn't part of the EU, actually neither was Britain technically at that point. I felt that we had been invaded, that there was an incursion on our space, and I felt personally kind of part of that. And then as the years went on, and I saw refugees arriving in London, and we took in, or my family took in, a couple of Ukrainian refugees who stayed with us and kind of lived in the attic kind of thing. And I learned more about what was going on. I felt that sense of we need to do something becoming continually stronger. And then eventually I got introduced to some brigade commanders who had a problem. And I've spent my whole life, in tech basically helping people solve problems. And so at some point as the rage kind of got stronger, equally, the more I then started speaking to, people in active combat and what they were going through, the product manager and the engineer kind of internally started speaking a little bit louder as well. And then I kind of ended up somewhere in the middle.
Your background is not in technically defense or dual use. So you've been in a number of other industries, and it's not also your first rodeo. This is your fourth business. How has that been kind of jumping into a whole new industry?
So it was wiggly background, right? So I've done a bunch of industries. I think all companies, if you can distill what anything does, comes down to someone has a problem and it makes sense to solve that problem in a commercial way, right? If you're solving the problem without the commerce, you're doing a good charitable deed, and if you're doing it with commerce, it's a business, and somewhere along that spectrum, there's bootstrap stuff and small stuff and VC stuff. For me, because I've bounced around a bit, I've sort of made it my thing to try and get to that, what is that problem and what's the value of that problem? And so at the beginning of that Ukraine journey, it was for me donating time and donating support and help. And I wasn't actually trying to build a business, I was just trying to help people. And then at some point that became a VC thing, but it's nothing to do really to me between a logistics company or a telco company or a defense company. It is in all of these things there is someone who has pain, someone who has an issue, and when we can distill that down to its most simple format, can we solve it, can we scale it? And in this case, the problem that Ukraine faces is a problem that NATO faces, and then it's a problem that everybody faces, which is if we can't trust our machines to behave the way that we want them to because of electronic warfare, because of whatever, then that is a truly global crisis in the making. And so if we can take something from the Ukraine conflict, which is models, algorithms, which have been trained because Russia is messing with the electronics everywhere, and then we can make our commercial jets, our transport, our cars, our logistics, our ports more secure, then I think something good has come from this. And we've done two things simultaneously, which is we made a VC backable business, and we did the right thing. And I kind of usually have to pick one.
Yeah,
so it's quite nice to get both.
You've talked about the importance of that over your career,
yeah.
Balancing building a commercial business whilst also trying to do some good and drive positive outcomes. But we've also talked in the past about how there's such a strong mission here, which is different from the other businesses you've started. So how has that played out? Like, how do you think about this business versus the consultancy you ran, even working at, Moody's and Ocado? How are you thinking about this in comparison to those experiences?
Not to speak badly of anything I've done before. I've never cared as much. It's on the one hand, it's really hard to not get a motive when you are day in, day out dealing with people who are like literally putting their lives on the line. It's very hard to not get attached. It's very hard to not care. But at the same time, the broader problem, once you manage to disassociate and step back from that, the broader problem has engaged me in a way that nothing else has. I wrote about this somewhere, I can't remember. I said something like in previous startups, people always kept telling me, find the obsessive thing and then just do the obsessive thing. And that's the thing that you should found. And I think all my previous businesses were good businesses. I think they were fundamentally sound. I think they were good. But I didn't obsess anywhere near to the level that this is. And so it's taken me to my third founding to really internalize a lesson that every VC and everyone told me for years. And it's finally clicked, which is this is something that, this is something I'm quite literally prepared to go into a war zone and risk my life for. That's the level of obsession that I think founders need to get to.
Yeah, and I mean, anyone who's met you and has talked to you knows that you are very obsessed is the right word with this problem and with the product and with the outcomes you're driving. It's really clear and it's really palpable. So there are two things I want to touch on. One is you talk about risk. Obviously, all founders take risk. That's something we talk about at the very early stages of a business, jumping out of the maybe cushy corporate job. You're working in a very high-risk industry. Your advisors have made comments to you recently, but you also have a wife and a small child. How do you reconcile that in your head, and how do you think about that, when you're on a plane out to Ukraine?
The pithy answer, which I'll give you, and it's not the right answer, but the easy thing to say is something like, there are thousands of Ukrainian children who have been ripped from their homes, right? And I don't know if, as a parent, if I could look at my daughter in the eyes later and say that I had the opportunity to try and help other people, and I didn't do it. I don't think I would be the type of father that I want to be if I could do that. That's the easy answer. The harder answer and the more truthful one is I think, and I spoke to some of the Antler team, I think you as well, I think in the early days of the cohort, I think every day I was working on this, I kind of, it was never a strong majority, 51% of me wanted to carry on, right? And 49% of me was throw in the towel and go. I don't think I ever had a day where I was I'm 100%, I want to do this, because I was terrified for I have had chiefs of MI6 and GCHQ and flag officers and an SAS commander, and the list goes on, all tell me, personal security is a problem for you. You will be a target, you will be valid. I was amazed that we weren't hit last time I was in Ukraine, as were many people in the industry. And the risks are very real. And so every day, if I had a 60% I'm in, that was great. But some days it was 51. It's never dropped below 50. And I think it will never drop below 50.
But I think that's important. And I think having worked with you over the last however many months, you have a very high empathy level. And I think actually having a high empathy level means that you have a different take on risk and what level of risk you're willing to accept. And that's not just for you, but that's for your team as well, right? And we've talked about this in terms of how you take the team on that journey with you. So I think maintaining that 50, that balance is really important.
I would never ask anyone to take a risk that I wouldn't personally be prepared to take. And I just think that is, I don't think you can be a good leader if you ask people to take risks that you won't. The questions of how we keep the team safe and how we operate and how we scale is of great concern to me. And we don't have all the answers, but we have to address that as a team.
Maybe moving it away from the risk topic.
Cheerful.
To team. Your two co-founders are, both have PhDs in AI and robotics.
AKA much smarter than me, both of them.
They are building their first VC-backed business. This is obviously your third. How has that affected the way that you operate? I
think that the fact that it's my third is probably less relevant because I think every business is so unique in the way that you build the business. And while previous experiences are always helpful, there's still been a huge learning curve for me on this one, right? I mean, so it's good. I've maybe made more mistakes than them before that I know not to repeat. The first thing we all agreed when we sat down was that the mission and what we were trying to do as a business was more important than any one of us individually or even the three of us as a group. And it was more important than us, and you've invested, so you might want not to hear this, it's more important than making money or actually doing it under our own banner. The important thing was to succeed, because the cost of not succeeding is a critical risk for Europe. And we weren't prepared to do that, no matter the level of success that we might get or something else. And so having made that sort of like the axiom of what the team does, we would paint risk in that picture. So is this an acceptable risk, given that what we are trying to do, we believe, is of solving such an existential crisis for us? And how important are we really when stacked up against that? And so that helps paint some of the context. And whenever we lose that, we go to Ukraine and we speak to people and we remind ourselves quite what it means.
I think there's also something to consider around the fact that you've worked in companies, big corporates like Moody's and Ocado, so you've seen certain systems and structures and operational models function at scale, but also you started your career at Cambridge Analytica.
Oh, we got there.
So yeah, we did get there. We got there quite quickly. We'll go on to the ethical topic again, but you've seen things go awry. So that obviously plays into how you're thinking about building Occam.
Yeah, I mean, I burned into my memory is I remember seeing Bertie, so the Alexander Nix, the CEO. I saw him at the Senate Intelligence hearings and then the House of Commons hearings he did in the UK. And I'd left the business by that point, but just knowing who he was, having worked with him for so long and so closely, and then kind of seeing how that had all gone so horribly wrong, was of huge impact to me at like 22 years old, 23 years old, however old, it was quite a long time ago. And so, yeah, we are in a highly sensitive area. The technology that we're building is incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. It is being built in the wrong hands, though. There is, just as I'm here, there is another me somewhere else. But the questions of how we use, scale, manage, put guardrails, when we are releasing AI that is now embodied in the world, taking decisions, some of them life or death, the risks of that going wrong could be worse than the problem we try to cure. And so that process, and having gone that path with CA and which came, by the way, from a really good origin, Cambridge Analytica. We were helping troops in combat in the Middle East. We came from a very good place. And now we gave the world GDPR by unintentionally. So, things come from it. But yeah, that whole learning curve has massively enforced our strategy and how we both enforce ourselves and make sure that we continue to stay making the right decisions, and also how we communicate and make sure that people are in the loop, right? So, we work with NATO, we work with governments, we work with partners. We don't black box things. The technology is important for everybody to understand.
Well, there's something that often still gets talked about is grow fast and break things. And the industry in which you're working in, you can't adopt that mentality. That
is a matter of perspective. So, I mean, defense, for 70 years, we've had this amazing, US-backed peace, right? For 70 years. And during that, you absolutely don't want to move fast and break things. But prior to that, we had World War II. And then we absolutely did move fast and break things because we had to, because men were dying. Ukraine is in move fast and break things. When you are in a survival fight, you move incredibly fast, you break everything, because the cost of not winning is existential loss. And so in Ukraine, we move very fast and we break everything in pursuit of winning. Now, that is not the right approach for NATO at all, and that is not the way to introduce technologies into NATO and to a different context. But it is a way to harness the innovation that we're able to do in Ukraine to then mature technologies that would not have been created any other way, and then take those and repurpose them for other use cases.
So if we're actually talking about moving fast, you've been operating for
6 months.
6 months.
Ish,
So,
yeah, give take.
Just talk about what you've done in those 6 months, because it kind of changes the perception of what it means to move fast.
I mean, my daughter was born in early February, and then in early March, I suppose, I got a phone call suggesting I speak to some Ukrainians, and then by, I think 60 days later than that, I'd enrolled in Antler. I probably met you about a month or so after that, and then we deployed to the front line probably within 5 months of the idea. And that was now it's not mature, but it's an example of move fast and break things. It works, but it works with problems.
Move fast and not break things.
Move fast and break the minimum.
Yeah.
And then now we are, I can't talk a lot about what's coming for obvious reasons, because this podcast is audible to everybody. But, there will be more capabilities that are released soon, very soon, which are only possible with the technology that we've built. So that would have been unimaginable prior to us. And that will have come out within a year from that idea point. So I don't know if that's move fast and break things. In my head, I have a running tally of all the people and all the missions that could have succeeded and the impact we could have had if we'd been 1 day, 1 week, 1 month faster, right? So if I got to break some stuff to do that, yeah, on board. But then if we got to break things and people lose their lives or take unnecessary risks, that also is a problem. And so that's a conversation we have with Ukraine and with the brigades and with NATO, and the importance of building in the open.
You've managed to build credibility in a totally new industry quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
How have you done that? So one of the questions we have time and time again for founders is, you spent your career here, but now you want to enter this space. How are you going to make that transition? You've done it relatively successfully 5 months in, but how have you?
I think what makes me good at that is what makes me really bad in a corporate. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And so when I talk to a user or a customer, they know exactly where I'm coming from all the time, and I'm pretty raw and unfiltered. And I think that comes across, and I think that can be really an asset when you are trying to explain to someone that you are just trying to hear their problem and you are genuinely trying to solve. And I think from there, you might not get the, whatever space you're in, you might not get the contract, you might not get the agreement or the pilot or the, your killer drone to the front line or whatever it is that you're trying to do. You might not get that at that point, but you will build trust. You will build an authentic relationship. And then if you continue to be present and you continue to check in and you continue to learn and understand that space, you can leverage that into those things that you've done before. And I think that stays the same. And that's great when working with customers. It can be a real handicap in a corporate environment when you have the politics and everything else. So balancing that mix for the corpos is one thing, but for the startups, I think you just got to lean in and go full authentic.
You have to be a chameleon though, right? Like if you're talking to a brigade leader in Ukraine versus a politician in the UK versus the CEO of a defense prime, you have to be able to instill confidence in very different types of stakeholders and also instill credibility. That's kind of no mean feat.
But I think we all do that all the time. Like we code switch, right? Like we can still be genuine while communicating and landing that communication, meeting whoever we're talking to where they are, right? I use baby talk with my daughter. I'm genuinely there in the moment at the time, right? But I'm good, the whole thing, and I wouldn't talk to you that way in this. I mean, maybe it'd be a different kind of, it'd be a different audience, but it's still like. The code switch is there, and Obama did this all the time. Like when you saw Obama on the campaign trail, like Obama in like it was used against him in some cases, but Obama in like a predominantly white kind of state would communicate differently to when he was in a black state, and that code switch is just something we all do, whether we're talking to a customer or our directors or our someone else, right? I don't think you lose authenticity if you do that. So who I am in Ukraine is different to how I communicate here, sure. But I'm equally present in both moments. And both sides equally know that all I care about is trying to help us as a region secure ourselves.
So from your perspective, what would you say sets the best founders apart now in today's time? Is it domain expertise? Is it sector expertise? Is it velocity? Is it obsession with the problem? Obviously, it could be a whole host of those things. But from your... I'm
don't
curious.
All outliers look different? So there is no answer. My 2 cents, for what it's worth.
That's why I'm here.
I look at it like, who would I want to follow, right? So if I meet a founder, I meet many founders who I'm like, you seem technically amazing and brilliant. And like my internal standard for if I was going to score them and how good they are is like, would I drop everything I'm doing right now to follow you and be like the first person to follow you down your crazy vision, right? Because I think the number 2 guy is the most important guy. Because when you're on your own, you're just a crazy person screaming about your view of the world, right? You need that one person to follow you, and then you're a team. And then the 3rd person's a little bit easier, and the 4th person's a little bit easier after that, right? So if I see a founder, would I follow? And that means that they need to take the thing that they care about so strongly, and they need to transmit that to me in some way that makes me care enough to take a huge level of risk also to go with them on that. However you do that, I don't think it matters as long as you do that. Because everything else you can hire or you can raise for and then buy or contract or do or whatever. But if you can't bring people with you, then you will just be alone.
You've chosen quite an interesting time to go into the defence dual use space, tons of money flowing into it, conversations around American dynamism, European resilience. What's it really like at the coalface? And I mean building, I mean selling, and I mean fundraising. We talk about how founders have to get smacked in the face and get up and cope with rejection, and you've had a bit of that recently. But we read the headlines around defence, but what's it like working in it day to day?
It's been the hardest raise I've ever done.
Yeah.
By an unimaginably long distance. Don't start a company when you've just had an infant. Don't raise at the end of a bubble, I think. Just the whole defense is just emotively hard and spicy. And also everyone loves defense as long as you're defensive, but the moment you get anywhere near the sharp end, it starts causing problems. I think in defense, while there is a huge influx of money potentially going into defense, both from the private markets and from government spend, we don't know where to spend it. Because so many people came into the space all at the same time chasing it. I think it was very, very hard for a lot of investors to be able to kind of tell who was full of hot air and to distinguish between suddenly all these people who were diving in and they were like, well, there's a space and we've been told to come, and all the governments are saying that we should go in and we're co-investing and there's all this additional support. But how do we tell what's what? How do we tell what's real? And so that was one thing to navigate and to be able to help bring investors who I think really wanted to come with us, but also really struggled more so than any other space to find the justification to be able to make a decision.
On that, do you think now you have a better idea of what they're looking for and what traction, for want of a better word, means?
Our thesis as a business, part of our thesis as a business is that you need to have a number of flights in the air to be able to train AIs to be able to generalize well, to be able to fly and to do things, right? Which basically means, however you want to shape it, we got to fly a lot of missions, which is what we're doing in Ukraine. When you're in a war, most of the missions that you fly are offensive. That's the nature of a war. That's right. If you're not doing that, you're search and rescue or supply chain or something else, or grocery delivery. And so a lot of investors, when they think of defense, it's very easy to think about armor, right, or radar systems, or all these kind of support things that go into defense, which need innovation and need everything else. But fundamentally, everything in defense is built around part of a chain, which is designed to get to an outcome, which is we hold land, we take land, we move forward. And that can be a very difficult thing for defense and new investors to defense to understand. And so helping them bridge where that looks like for us as a business today and what that technology matures into in the future was, for me personally, the hardest thing to get to be able to learn how to communicate well, going back to the code switching. Because I spent so much time with the Ukrainians, who obviously are very laser focused on how do we fight. But then how we fight translates to, in the same way that we had, IBM did missile trajectories, right? And that's how they started, and then they became IBM, right? So how we move from the kind of use cases we have with Ukraine into some genuine defensive use cases and then civilian spaces, and being able to transmit that message when it wasn't top of my mind, but it was top of my investors' minds. That was, for me, the hardest thing to get to grips with in this phase of the business.
So when someone says to you, what is the big dream and vision for Occam? What do you say?
I want a world where any engineer or person or team can build a machine and then download an AI onto that machine on the edge and just tell it what to do. And that way round, we can do anything. We can automate grocery, which I know well from Ocado, and I know the problems around it. We can automate movement, our trucks, our vehicles. We can have drones out in space. We can mine the asteroid belt. There's this huge potential of everything that we can do if we can make our machines truly autonomous. But to make our machines truly autonomous, they need to be disconnected from us. If we need to be connected to something all the time, it's not autonomous, it's a drone, right? And so to be able to get to that world, I think Ukraine has given us the opportunity to build a foundation of that thing. And that would make something good come from this. That's my vision for it.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you think about the Occam story or your story that you want to share with the world, that you can share?
I'm assuming this is mainly like founders, people who want to be founders, like listening to this. Find something that you are prepared for the whole world to think you crazy, and continue to advocate for it in the face of overwhelming resistance from everyone, from family, from friends, from colleagues, from investors, from everybody, and believe enough to continue to fight for that thing. And then, just find that thing. Life is far more fun when you care that badly.
That is a great message to end on. Thank you so much for joining for this episode. And as I said, if you want to listen to more stories from founders and operators and investors, then just like and subscribe. See you soon.